Her husband left the black girl pregnant at the stagecoach stop, dust swirling around her trembling form as the wagon disappeared into the horizon. Then a weathered cowboy stepped from the shadows and muttered, "My children need love." The station master kicks her belongings into the dirt, stepping over the abandoned girl like she's nothing more than tumbleweed. Townspeople whisper with cruel pity, seeing only a burden destined to perish in the desert heat before nightfall. But the lonely cowboy watches with different eyes, haunted by his own losses, 3 motherless children waiting at his ranch, and a grief that recognizes itself in others. What neither knows is that her stolen inheritance could save dozens of families from losing their homes, while his offer of shelter masks deeper consequences that will challenge everything this frontier town believes about justice and worth. Will they forge an alliance that rewrites both their fates, or will the secrets buried in her past destroy them all? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The cramped boarding house room reeked of desperation and broken dreams. Magdalene Johnson pressed her hand against her swollen belly, watching her husband Samuel pace like a caged wolf. His eyes held something she'd never seen before, something cold. Samuel rifled through her trunk again, pushing aside her few dresses to reach the leather folder beneath, the same folder he'd been obsessing over for weeks. "Where did your father keep the rest of his papers?" Maggie shifted on the thin mattress. "I told you, that's everything. The deed, the will, some legal correspondence." Samuel's jaw tightened. He'd grown thinner lately, more desperate. The charming man who'd courted her 6 months ago had vanished, replaced by this stranger who spoke in clipped sentences and avoided her eyes. "We need to leave this place," Samuel announced suddenly. "Pack everything. We're heading west." "West?" "Samuel, the baby's due in 2 months. I can't travel that far." "You'll manage." He stuffed the leather folder into his coat pocket. "There are opportunities out there, fresh starts." Something in his tone made her stomach clench beyond the usual pregnancy pains. Samuel had been asking strange questions lately about her father's clients. About property boundaries, about legal procedures she barely understood herself. The 3-day journey to Thornfield Station passed in uncomfortable silence. Samuel sat rigid beside her on the hard wagon bench, never meeting her eyes, never asking if she needed water or rest. When they finally reached the dusty outpost, he helped her down with mechanical politeness. "Wait here with the bags." Samuel disappeared into the station office. Through the grimy window, Maggie watched him speak with the station master, their conversation animated and secretive. Money changed hands, papers were signed. When Samuel returned, his face was set like stone. "I can't do this, Magdalene." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "This." He gestured vaguely at her belly, at the bags, at everything. "I'm not ready to be a father." "I never was." "Samuel, please, we can figure this out together." He pulled a folded letter from his pocket and pressed it into her hands. "Everything you need to know is in there." "You're leaving me here?" "You're better off without me." His voice cracked slightly, the first emotion she'd heard from him in weeks. "Find someone who can give you what you need." Samuel climbed back onto the wagon without looking at her. The driver cracked his whip. Dust swirled as the wagon rolled away, taking her husband and her future with it. Maggie's legs gave out. She sank onto her trunk, the letter trembling in her hands. Around her, the few people at the station began to stare and whisper. The station master, a thin man with calculating eyes, approached with obvious reluctance. "Ma'am, you can't stay here. This ain't a charity house. Please, I just need a moment." "Moment's up. You got money for a room or passage somewhere?" Maggie fumbled through her reticule. $3 and some change. Samuel had left her with almost nothing. A woman in a faded blue dress shook her head sadly. "Shame what some men do. Leave a woman in her condition like that." "What did you expect?" muttered a man loading cargo. "Her kind don't think ahead." The words stung worse than Samuel's abandonment. These people looked at her and saw only what they expected to see. A burden, a problem to be moved along. "Ma'am, You need to move on, the station master pressed. The next stage won't take you without payment. Maggie forced herself to stand. Her father had taught her dignity was something no one could take away. She smoothed her dress and lifted her chin, even as her world crumbled around her. I understand your position, sir. The station master blinked, clearly surprised by her precise speech and calm manner. Most people were. Her father had made sure she spoke properly, read constantly, understood the world beyond their small community. From the shadows near the water trough, a figure watched the scene unfold. The man was tall and weathered, with kind eyes that had seen too much sorrow. His clothes marked him as a rancher or cowboy, but something in his bearing suggested gentleness beneath the rough exterior. Levi McAllister recognized the look in the young woman's eyes. He'd worn the same expression when Clara died, leaving him alone with 3 children and a heart full of questions. The woman's husband was a fool, but that wasn't his concern. What concerned him was the memory of his 8-year-old twins asking why their hair was never braided properly anymore, of his 5-year-old son Joshua crying for stories at bedtime that Levi couldn't tell the way Clara used to. The woman possessed something his children desperately needed. Not just care, but the kind of patient intelligence he glimpsed in her careful words and straight spine despite her circumstances. Levi stepped forward, his decision made. Ma'am, I couldn't help but overhear your situation. Maggie turned, wariness flickering across her face. Another man with an agenda was the last thing she needed. My children need love, Levi said simply, and maybe you need a place where that matters more than anything else. Maggie studied the stranger's weathered face, searching for the hidden motives she'd learned to expect from men. Instead, she found only quiet sincerity and bone-deep exhaustion. You don't know anything about me. I know you speak like an educated woman. I know you carry yourself with dignity, even when the world's falling apart. Levi gestured toward the whispering onlookers. That's more than most folks manage. The station master cleared his throat impatiently. This ain't a social gathering. Y'all need to settle this somewhere else. Levi ignored him, keeping his attention on Maggie. My name's Levi McAllister. I run a ranch about 3 days north. Lost my wife 2 years back, and my children need someone who can teach them proper, give them the kind of care I can't. What exactly are you proposing? Governess work? Teaching my twins, Emma and Sarah, their letters and numbers. Helping with my boy Joshua, he's only 5. Room, board, and fair wages in exchange. The offer was more generous than anything she could hope for in her condition. But Maggie had learned caution the hard way. Why would you help a stranger? Levi's expression softened. Because I know what it's like when the person who's supposed to protect you just walks away. Something in his voice convinced her. This man understood abandonment from the inside out. I accept your offer, Mr. McAllister. The journey to Circle M Ranch revealed more about her unlikely rescuer with each passing mile. Levi spoke of his children with fierce tenderness, describing Emma's love of stories and Sarah's quick mind for mathematics. Joshua, he explained, hadn't spoken much since Clara's death. They need stability, Levi admitted, as they made camp the second night. Someone who won't disappear on them. Maggie poked at the small fire, considering her words carefully. My father always said children bloom when they feel truly seen. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was a lawyer, spent most of his time helping folks who couldn't afford legal representation. The words slipped out before she could stop them. She rarely mentioned her father's profession to strangers. Levi looked up from checking his horse's bridle. A lawyer? That's uncommon. Heat flushed Maggie's cheeks. He believed education was the greatest gift he could give me. Taught me to read using his law books when I was barely old enough to hold them. What else did he teach you? The question held genuine curiosity, not the mocking tone she expected. Literature, philosophy, basic legal principles. She paused. Mathematics and Latin. Levi whistled low. That's more education than most men receive. My father said knowledge belongs to anyone willing to work for it. Maggie's hand moved protectively over her belly. I plan to teach my child the same way. Something shifted in Levi's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit. The ranch appeared on the third day, modest but well-maintained. A 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch sat surrounded by pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. Everything spoke of careful attention and honest labor. 3 small figures burst from the house as the wagon approached. Twin girls with dark braids flying behind them raced toward their father, followed by a smaller boy who hung back shyly. "Papa, Papa, did you bring supplies from town?" Levi jumped down and swept both girls into a bear hug. "I brought something better. I brought help." He turned to assist Maggie from the wagon, noting how the children's eyes widened at her condition. "Emma, Sarah, Joshua, I'd like you to meet Miss Maggie Johnson. She's going to be your new governess." Emma, clearly the bolder twin, stepped forward. "Are you going to have a baby, Miss Maggie?" "Yes, I am." "Will it be a boy or a girl?" "I don't know yet. That's part of the surprise." Sarah hung back, studying Maggie with serious eyes. "Do you know stories?" "I know many stories, and I'd love to hear some of yours." Joshua remained silent, clutching a carved wooden horse, but his curious gaze never left Maggie's face. That evening, after a simple supper, Maggie found herself surrounded by 3 eager children as she unpacked her few belongings. They gasped when she pulled out her father's copy of Shakespeare's complete works. "Can you really read all those words?" Emma asked in wonder. "Everyone, would you like me to read you something?" "Oh, yes, please." Maggie opened to A Midsummer Night's Dream and began to read, adjusting her voice for each character. The children listened with rapt attention, even Joshua creeping closer as the story unfolded. From the doorway, Levi watched in amazement. His children hadn't shown this much engagement with anything since Clara's death. Maggie's cultured voice filled the room with magic, transforming simple words into living theater. When she finished the scene, Sarah clapped her hands. "You sound just like the characters." "How did you learn to do that?" "Practice and imagination, the same way you'll learn if you'd like." "Could you teach us to read like that?" "I would be honored to teach you." Later, after the children were tucked into bed, Levi found Maggie on the front porch, staring up at the star-filled sky. "Thank you," he said simply. "I haven't seen them that happy in months. They're wonderful children. You should be proud." Clara always handled the book learning. I felt lost trying to fill that role. Maggie turned to face him. "You're a good father, Mr. McAllister. They know they're loved. Call me Levi, and you're going to fit in perfectly here." For the first time since Samuel's abandonment, Maggie felt something like hope stirring in her chest. The storm struck without warning on Maggie's 3rd week at the ranch. Lightning split the sky while thunder shook the farmhouse windows. Inside, Maggie doubled over as pain tore through her body. "It's too early," she gasped, gripping the kitchen table. Levi rushed to her side, his face pale. "How early?" 6 weeks. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. "Something's wrong." Emma and Sarah appeared in their nightgowns, drawn by the commotion. Joshua peeked around the doorway, clutching his wooden horse. "Papa, is Miss Maggie hurt?" Emma whispered. "The baby's coming early. I need you 3 to stay in your room while I help her." Levi's voice remained steady despite his racing heart. "Can you do that for me?" The twins nodded solemnly and led Joshua away. Levi turned back to Maggie, who was breathing hard through another wave of pain. "The nearest doctor is in Thornfield." "I can't make it there and back in this weather." "Then we do this ourselves." Maggie's voice carried surprising strength. "I've read about childbirth in my father's medical texts." Levi stared at her. "Medical texts?" He collected books on every subject, said knowledge was never wasted. She gritted her teeth through another contraction. "Help me to the bedroom, then get clean towels and boil water." For the next 4 hours, Levi followed Maggie's calm instructions, marveling at her composure. She guided him through each step, her medical knowledge proving as thorough as her literary education. When complications arose, she diagnosed the problem and explained the solution with clinical precision, the cords wrapped around the baby's neck. You'll need to slip your finger underneath and ease it over the head when I tell you. How do you know this? My father defended a midwife accused of malpractice. I read every medical journal and textbook he gathered for the case. Another contraction hit. Knowledge saves lives, he always said. The baby finally came as dawn broke, tiny but breathing strong. A daughter with her mother's delicate features and a surprisingly powerful cry. She's beautiful, Levi whispered, carefully wrapping the infant in a clean towel. Maggie reached for her daughter with trembling arms. Hope. Her name is Hope. As Levi cleaned up the medical supplies, he noticed Maggie's travel bag had fallen open during the chaos. Legal documents spilled across the floor, their official seals catching the morning light. He gathered them carefully, but couldn't help seeing the names printed in formal script. Jeremiah Johnson, attorney at law, property deeds for substantial holdings, a last will and testament leaving everything to his daughter, Magdalene Johnson. Levi's hands stilled. The woman he'd rescued wasn't just educated. She was wealthy. The documents detailed land ownership, mineral rights, and legal trusts that would make her one of the richest people in 3 territories. You saw the papers. Maggie's voice was quiet but steady. Levi looked up to find her watching him. Hope nestled against her chest. No shame colored her expression, only resignation. I saw them. Then you know Samuel didn't just abandon me. He stole everything first. She adjusted the baby's blanket with gentle fingers. My father died 8 months ago, left me property worth more than most towns. Samuel married me 3 weeks later. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. He took your inheritance papers when he left. Every deed, every legal document, every proof of ownership. Maggie's eyes hardened. He forged transfer papers and disappeared, leaving me to die in the desert. No one would believe a pregnant woman's claims without documentation. Levi sat heavily in the chair beside the bed. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to judge me by my character, not my father's legacy. She met his gaze directly. Would you have offered me work if you'd known I was supposedly wealthy? Yes, but I might have questioned your motives. Exactly. Maggie shifted Hope to her other arm. I've learned that people treat you differently when they know about money. Some become servile, others resentful. Few see you as simply human. What Samuel did was theft, fraud. Proving that requires lawyers, courts, and evidence I don't have. Her voice carried bitter experience. My word against his forged documents. A black woman's testimony against a white man's legal papers. You know how that ends. Levi studied the scattered documents more carefully. Property deeds for land throughout Kansas and Colorado. Mining rights, water rights, business partnerships with prominent families. Your father must have been remarkable. He spent 30 years building legal protections for families like ours, helped dozens of people secure land ownership and business rights. Pride crept into her voice. Samuel isn't just stealing from me. He's stealing from everyone my father helped. What do you mean? The property includes homesteads my father secured for black families moving west. If Samuel sells to developers, those families lose everything. Maggie's jaw tightened. He's not just a thief. He's destroying lives. The enormity hit Levi like a physical blow. This wasn't about one woman's stolen inheritance. Entire communities hung in the balance. We have to stop him. We? Maggie raised an eyebrow. This isn't your fight, Levi. It became my fight the moment you stepped into my children's lives. He gathered the papers into a neat stack. Besides, I know people. Honest ranchers, fair-minded businessmen. Not everyone in this territory judges by color. For the first time since her abandonment, something like hope flickered in Maggie's eyes. It won't be easy. Samuel's had weeks to establish his claims. Then we'd better get started. Levi stood, his mind already working through possibilities. But first, you need to recover. Hope needs her mother strong. Maggie looked down at her daughter, then back at Levi. Why are you doing this? Because it's right, and because my children deserve to grow up in a world where justice matters more than prejudice. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the air clean and full of promise. 3 weeks after Hope's birth, Maggie sat at Levi's kitchen table, surrounded by maps, legal documents, and hastily scrawled notes. Her recovery had been swift, driven by urgency that grew stronger each day. Samuel filed claims on the Colorado properties first, she said, pointing to red marks on the territorial map. The Patterson family homestead, the Williams mining claim, the Morrison water rights. Levi studied the papers over her shoulder. How many families are affected? 17 that I can identify. My father spent years helping them secure legal ownership. Maggie's finger traced property boundaries. Samuel's selling to Consolidated Development Company. They're forcing families off land that's rightfully theirs. From the living room came the sound of the children playing with baby Hope. Emma and Sarah took turns reading stories aloud while Joshua made silly faces to make the infant laugh. The sight never failed to warm Levi's heart. Tom Brewster from the general store might help, Levi suggested. He's got connections with the territorial government. We need more than connections. We need proof Samuel forged those documents. Maggie pulled out her father's law books. I've been researching precedent cases. There are ways to challenge fraudulent claims, but the evidence has to be ironclad. Over the following days, they developed their strategy. Levi rode to neighboring ranches, speaking with men he'd known for years. Maggie wrote letters to her father's former clients, explaining the situation and asking for testimony. Word began to spread through the territory's network of honest settlers. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Adelaide Chen, who ran the boarding house in Millerville, arrived at the ranch with a carpet bag full of evidence. That husband of yours stayed at my place for 3 nights, she told Maggie. Talked too much when he was drinking. Bragged about marrying into money and getting rich quick. She pulled out a ledger book. He paid with a bank draft signed with your father's name. Only problem is, your father died before the date on the draft. Maggie examined the document carefully. This is definitive proof of forgery. Samuel backdated this by 2 months. There's more. Mrs. Chen produced a bundle of papers. He left these behind when he ran off. Thought they weren't important. The papers included correspondence with Consolidated Development, rough maps of property boundaries, and most damning of all, Samuel's practice sheets where he'd worked to perfect Jeremiah Johnson's signature. Levi whistled low. This man was thorough in his thievery. Thorough but sloppy, Maggie corrected. He never expected anyone to investigate. Certainly not a woman he left to die in the desert. Their case grew stronger daily. 3 ranchers from Millerville confirmed Samuel's suspicious behavior and excessive spending. A bank clerk in Denver testified that Samuel had tried to cash forged drafts. Most importantly, 2 of the affected families traveled to the ranch to share their stories. Marcus Williams arrived first, a dignified man in his 50s whose mining claim was being contested. Your father saved my family, he told Maggie. Helped me file proper papers when other lawyers wouldn't take my case. That claim is legal and documented. The Patterson family came next. James Patterson brought his teenage son and pregnant wife, all 3 terrified of losing their homestead. We got nowhere else to go, James said simply. Your daddy made sure our deed was proper. We've been working that land for 4 years. Maggie spent hours with each family, documenting their cases and gathering evidence. Her legal knowledge proved invaluable as she identified the specific statutes Samuel had violated and the procedures needed to restore rightful ownership. The children adapted to the constant stream of visitors with remarkable grace. Emma and Sarah helped serve meals and played with the Patterson boy, while adults discussed legal strategy. Joshua, slowly emerging from his shell, showed baby Hope to everyone who visited. Miss Maggie, are you really going to court like a real lawyer? Sarah asked one evening as they prepared supper. I'm going to represent myself and the other families, yes. Will you win? Maggie paused in her bread kneading. I hope so. Justice doesn't always prevail. But we have truth on our side. Papa says truth is the strongest weapon there is. Your papa is a wise man. As their legal case solidified, something deeper developed between Maggie and Levi. Shared purpose brought them closer, but so did daily intimacy of running a household together. Levi found himself watching Maggie with growing admiration as she balanced motherhood, teaching, and legal preparation with quiet competence. Maggie felt the change too, the way Levi listened to her ideas without condescension, how he supported her decisions while offering practical help, the gentle way he held baby Hope when Maggie needed both hands free for legal work. One evening after the children were asleep, they sat on the front porch reviewing testimony from the Williams family. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. "You know this could be dangerous," Levi said quietly. "Men like Samuel don't give up easily when money's involved. Are you suggesting I abandon the fight?" "I'm suggesting we prepare for him to fight back." Levi's expression was serious. "He's got too much at stake to walk away quietly." Maggie folded the legal papers carefully. "Then we'd better make sure our case is unshakable." "It already is. You've built something that would impress any judge." Pride colored Levi's voice. "Your father would be proud." "I hope so." She looked out at the peaceful ranch where cattle grazed in the distance and fireflies began their evening dance. "This place has given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "A family worth fighting for." Their eyes met in the gathering dusk, understanding passing between them without words. The sound of approaching horses shattered the morning peace at Circle M Ranch. Maggie looked up from feeding Hope to see dust clouds on the horizon. Too many riders for a social call. Levi stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually, but ready. "Get the children inside." "Emma, Sarah, Joshua, come here right now." Maggie's voice carried authority that brooked no argument. The children obeyed instantly, sensing danger in the adults' tension. 6 men rode into the yard, led by a figure Maggie recognized with sick certainty. Samuel sat his horse like he owned the world, flanked by rough-looking men who carried themselves like hired muscle. "Hello, wife." The word dripped with mockery. Samuel's appearance had changed in the months since his abandonment. Better clothes, expensive boots, a gold watch chain glinting across his vest. Stolen wealth had treated him well. "You're not welcome here," Levi said, stepping forward. Samuel's eyes never left Maggie. "I'm here for what belongs to me, my wife and the property she stole. I stole nothing. You forged my father's name and stole my inheritance. Prove it." Samuel's smile was cold as winter wind. "You're just a desperate woman making wild accusations. These gentlemen are here to ensure you return home peacefully." One of the hired men shifted in his saddle, hand resting on his gun. The threat was clear without words. "I have proof," Maggie said steadily. "Bank records, witness testimony, examples of your forged signatures." Samuel's confidence flickered momentarily. Legal papers can be fabricated. Witnesses can be mistaken. Can they? Maggie pulled a document from her apron pocket. "This is your practice sheet, Samuel. 17 attempts to forge my father's signature. You left it at Mrs. Chen's boarding house." The color drained from Samuel's face as he recognized his own handwriting. His hired men exchanged glances, suddenly less certain about their employer's claims. "That proves nothing. It proves you're a liar and a thief." Levi's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd never backed down from a fight. "And you're trespassing on my land." "Your land?" Samuel laughed harshly. "This whole territory will belong to Consolidated Development soon enough, including your little ranch." The admission hung in the air like gun smoke. Samuel had revealed more than he intended, confirming suspicions about the scope of his criminal enterprise. "How many families have you displaced?" Maggie demanded. "How many people have lost their homes because of your greed?" "Progress requires sacrifice. Some people just aren't strong enough to adapt." The casual cruelty in his words made Levi's jaw tighten. "You mean people aren't the right color to deserve protection?" Samuel shrugged. "I mean weak people lose to strong people. That's how the world works." "Then you should be terrified," Maggie said quietly, "because I'm stronger than you ever imagined." Something in her tone made Samuel's eyes narrow. This wasn't the broken woman he'd abandoned at the stagecoach stop. This woman stood straight-backed and fearless, supported by a man who clearly loved her and children who adored her. "You can't fight this, Magdalene. I have lawyers, investors, connections you can't match. I have something better. I have the truth. Truth doesn't win in court. Money wins in court. We'll see about that." Maggie turned to Levi. "It's time to file our case officially." Samuel's facade cracked completely. "You can't take this to court. You have no legal standing." "I have every legal standing. I'm Jeremiah Johnson's daughter and heir. Every document you forged bears my father's name, making this a federal case of mail fraud and property theft." The hired men were openly nervous now, realizing their employer had entangled them in something far more serious than a domestic dispute. Federal charges meant federal marshals, territorial courts, and penalties that could include prison time. "Boss, maybe we should reconsider this approach," one of them muttered. "Shut up." Samuel's mask of civility had vanished entirely. "Magdalene, you have one chance to walk away from this. Come with me now, sign papers transferring your claims legally, and I'll make sure you're comfortable." "And if I refuse?" "Then you'll lose everything anyway, plus face charges for making false accusations against your lawful husband." "I'm not your wife anymore, Samuel. I haven't been since the moment you abandoned me to die in the desert. The law says otherwise. The law says a lot of things. It also says theft is a crime, fraud is a crime, and conspiracy is a crime." Maggie's voice grew stronger with each word. "You've committed all three." Levi stepped closer to Maggie, his presence a silent declaration of support. From inside the house came baby Hope's crying, a reminder of what was at stake beyond property and money. Samuel looked between them, his hired men, and the ranch that had become Maggie's fortress of family and justice. His grand plan to intimidate her into submission was crumbling. "This isn't over," he said finally. "You're right, it isn't." Maggie lifted her chin. "Tomorrow morning, I'm filing formal charges in Thornfield's territorial court. Bring your lawyers, Samuel. Bring your investors and your connections. Bring everyone you think will protect you from the consequences of your crimes. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is believing you were capable of honor." She turned her back on him dismissively. "Now get off my friend's property before I have you arrested for trespassing." Samuel wheeled his horse around, his men following with obvious relief to be leaving. As they rode away, dust settling in their wake, Maggie felt something she hadn't experienced since her father's death. She felt powerful. The makeshift courthouse in Thornfield buzzed with tension as townspeople packed every available seat. Word had spread about the legal showdown between the abandoned woman and her thieving husband. Some came for entertainment. Others came to witness justice. Maggie entered the building carrying baby Hope, while Levi shepherded Emma, Sarah, and Joshua to the front row. She wore her best dress, her father's law books under her arm, and an expression of calm determination that made several observers sit up straighter. Samuel arrived with 2 expensive lawyers from Denver, their polished appearance meant to intimidate. The Consolidated Development representatives sat behind them, confident in their purchased influence. Territorial Judge Harrison Walsh took his seat, a fair-minded man known for following law over politics. His weathered face revealed nothing as he surveyed the crowded room. "This court is called to order. We're here to adjudicate claims regarding the estate of Jeremiah Johnson and allegations of fraud against Samuel Morrison." Maggie stood, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Your Honor, I represent myself and the 17 families whose property rights were stolen through document forgery and conspiracy." Samuel's lead lawyer, a thin man with calculating eyes, rose quickly. "Your Honor, my client disputes these wild accusations. Mrs. Morrison is clearly suffering from emotional distress following a difficult childbirth." "Mrs. Morrison?" Judge Walsh looked confused. "The plaintiff's name is listed as Johnson." "A clerical error, Your Honor. This woman is legally married to my client." Maggie stepped forward. "Your Honor, I was abandoned by this man at a stagecoach stop when I was 8 months pregnant. Any marriage contract was dissolved by his deliberate abandonment and subsequent theft of my inheritance. She presented her first piece of evidence. This is Samuel Morrison's practice sheet, showing 17 attempts to forge my father's signature. He left it behind at Mrs. Chen's boarding house in Millerville. The judge examined the document carefully. Even from the gallery, the progression from clumsy attempts to near-perfect forgeries was obvious. Samuel's lawyer scrambled for response. "That proves nothing, Your Honor. Anyone could have written those signatures." Mrs. Ma Chen stood from the gallery. "I saw him practicing them signatures myself. Bragged about getting rich off his wife's inheritance when he was drinking." "Hearsay," the lawyer protested. "Direct witness testimony," Maggie corrected smoothly. "Mrs. Chen observed the defendant's actions firsthand." The judge nodded. "The witness may testify." Mrs. Chen described Samuel's behavior in damning detail. His excessive spending, his boasts about easy money, his forged bank drafts. Each word built Maggie's case stronger. Samuel's second lawyer tried a different approach. "Your Honor, even if some irregularities occurred, my client acted in good faith as this woman's legal husband." "Good faith?" Maggie's voice rang with controlled outrage. "He stole property deeds, forged legal documents, and abandoned me to die in the desert." "Which part demonstrates good faith?" She presented document after document. Bank records showing impossible dates, witness statements from Denver clerks, testimony from the affected families. Each piece of evidence was precisely organized and legally sound. Emma suddenly stood from the front row. "Your Honor, may I say something?" Judge Walsh looked surprised but nodded. "Go ahead, young lady." "Miss Maggie is the kindest, smartest person I know. She teaches us every day and takes care of baby Hope and helps Papa with everything. She would never lie about anything." Sarah joined her sister. "She reads us stories and explains hard words and makes us feel safe. That man never came to see if she was okay or if the baby was healthy." Joshua, emboldened by his sisters, added his quiet voice. "Miss Maggie makes the best biscuits and gives the best hugs and never gets angry when we make mistakes." The simple honesty of the children's words carried more weight than any legal argument. Several people in the gallery wiped their eyes. Samuel's lawyers looked increasingly desperate as their case crumbled. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses credible, and their client's character exposed as fundamentally corrupt. Judge Walsh studied the mountain of evidence before him. "Mr. Morrison, do you have any response to these charges?" Samuel stood, his earlier arrogance replaced by cornered desperation. "I made mistakes, Your Honor, but I never meant to hurt anyone." "You stole 17 families' homes," Maggie said quietly. "You forged my father's name to steal property he spent 30 years protecting." "You abandoned your pregnant wife to die alone. Which part was accidental?" Samuel had no answer that wouldn't further incriminate him. Judge Walsh's verdict was swift and decisive. "The evidence clearly demonstrates systematic fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. All property transfers are hereby declared null and void. Mr. Morrison will face federal charges for mail fraud and property theft." The courtroom erupted in cheers from the affected families. Marcus Williams pumped his fist in the air while James Patterson hugged his pregnant wife. Justice had finally arrived. As Samuel was led away in chains, he turned back one last time. "You think you've won? But you've got nowhere to belong now." "You're wrong," Maggie said simply. "I already belong exactly where I am." 3 months later, Maggie and Levi stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. Hope crawled between Emma's legs while Sarah taught Joshua to read. The legal victory had restored not just property, but hope to an entire community. Levi slipped his arm around Maggie's waist. "Any regrets about the path that brought you here?" "None whatsoever." Maggie leaned into his embrace. "Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing that ever happens to you." In the distance, a stagecoach approached the now renamed Hope Station, where Maggie had established a way station for travelers in need. She made sure no one else would face abandonment alone in the desert. Justice had transformed not just her life, but an entire territory where character mattered more than circumstance.